The death penalty exists in 33 states of the United States of America. However, in recent years, a much smaller number has actually performed them. Executions are carried out by lethal injection. In certain cases, execution by firing squad is still permitted in Utah and Oklahoma. As a German, coming from a different historical background and being a guest in the United States, I respectfully disagree with the practice of capital punishment. This is Douglas Feldman. He agreed to talk to us on death row at Polunsky Unit in Texas. Since his conviction, he has spent the last 13 years here. Douglas Feldman, thank you very much for talking with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Fine meaning?
Meaning I've been here so long, I'm just sort of used to it. And I mean, it's kind of a harsh place, but I think, like I said, I've been here so long, I've just kind of gotten accustomed to the uncomfortableness and everything else, and the harshness of it, and it doesn't bother me like it might bother someone who's not used to it.
And how do you deal with the guards?
I really don't have much conversation with anybody in prison because it just doesn't seem like it's appropriate to me. They're holding me as a prisoner, and a lot of times they try to have a conversation like we're colleagues or friends or something, and to me it feels inappropriate, and I just don't really want to start down the road, you know, of having a friendship, really. But I've been here so long that I can't help but become familiar with a lot of the guards, and they've become familiar with me, so there's a certain rapport that gets developed over time anyway, just as a result of being exposed to each other. But probably I'm sort of aloof or standoffish most of the time.
Yeah.
I sort of do what I'm supposed to do and try to stay out of the way.
Some of them seem to be scared of you because you whistle.
Oh, I don't know. I whistle occasionally, but maybe if I drink some coffee or something and I get a little stimulated, I might whistle some, but I don't know why they would be scared of it. I just whistle songs from memory that I maybe have heard on the radio when I was younger or something, or...
Do you remember one of these songs? Can you whistle for me?
I probably could, but...
Yeah.
One of them, some of the songs I remember from when I was a kid, it's not even my generation. Like one of them I remember, I might have heard it off of a movie because they use a lot of old music as themes or background music in a movie. Would be Fly Me to the Moon that Frank Sinatra used to sing.
How is the melody?
It goes, fly me to the moon and let me sing among the stars. Let me see what life is like on Jupiter and Mars. And it's a real famous song in the United States from like 1950, you know, it's before me, but it's a real good melody.
And we are probably violating copyright laws right now.
Yeah, you probably can't show that, I don't know. And I find that the music from the early 60s and 50s is more melodic, and it's a lot easier to reproduce.
And to whistle.
Yeah, and to whistle.
Yeah.
Well, we got dispatched to a shooting up on the highway, and I was right less than a block away from where the incident occurred. And
You were alone or with a colleague?
I was alone. So I got up on the highway and I saw an 18-wheeler in the center lane of traffic. It stopped, and when I walked up the side of the truck to go check the driver, I could see bullet holes in the trailer starting from the back all the way up to the front, and I think there were 2 or 3 bullet holes in the driver's door. And I crawled up into the truck, and the truck driver was slumped over between the seats, and I reached in to check him for pulse, and there was none. He appeared to be deceased right there.
And what had happened? What did you do then?
Well, we've talked to witnesses. Some other officers showed up and we discovered that it was a guy on a motorcycle that had done the shooting.
This is Douglas Feldman's mother.
Oh, God.
She did not want to be identified.
I think there's a lot of anger. He's got a lot of anger. When he was a young boy, and he was running away and doing things that I found out later. I didn't know what was happening at the time, and
For example?
he broke into a house and stole a gun. And
At what age?
around 10, 11, something like that.
Around the time of this picture, Douglas was already into drugs. By age 11, he was taken into juvenile detention. Did you see early on that he couldn't control his anger?
Yes, when he was, like I say, when he was like 8, 9, 10, I would say, Doug, okay, will you please go do that? No. And I'd say, well, honey, I'm asking you to do this for me. Please go do it. No. And then I would start getting frustrated and say, you have to do it. I'm your mother. Please, you have to do this. And he just wouldn't, and he would get so frustrated he would grab a butcher knife and threaten me. And then I guess he got scared because he would run out the door. And then he started running away from home every time we had this little confrontation. And at one time he pulled a gun on his older brother because his brother always teased him, because my husband, unfortunately, would taunt my older son. And my older son would taunt Doug, and then Doug would taunt his younger sister.
You have seen quite a bit of the world, and you have gone through hardship. You have slept on the side of the road.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have.
You have slept in hammocks.
Yes, in the jungle, In Brazil, I did.
You have slept on a big spider.
I don't know. I definitely did. Now that
I have a beautiful list.
Yeah.
You traveled a lot.
Yeah, I have traveled a lot. It was fun, but it was difficult at the same time.
On your motorcycle? Sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes. I traveled mainly around the United States on the motorcycle. I drove to Key West one time at Florida, and I went to Las Vegas one time. These are all from Dallas. I was living in Dallas.
Right.
And another time I drove all the way down to Acapulco, Mexico.
Right.
And each trip would be about a month, and it would take me 2 or 3 weeks to get there and a couple weeks to get back.
I do have a list that you compiled once. Injuries and close calls.
Oh, all right.
May I read a few? Chased by a wild bull
Yes.
near the volcan Rumainahui in Ecuador. Indian riot, roads blocked and army firing guns. Ecuador. Do you recall that one?
Yeah, I do actually. I was with 2 girls from Norway, and we were going across a bridge to get to a jungle camp. And we were in Ecuador. We were traveling from Baños towards the east, and there was a bridge. Apparently, there's some territory behind Ecuador that Peru claims, and so there was a war between the 2 countries, and the bridge was the line. Yes. And we crossed the bridge, and there was some sort of demonstration, and the Peruvian army was trying to stop the Ecuadorians from coming into that territory, and they started firing tear gas and weapons into the air just as we were passing over, and there was a big clash, a physical clash, where the army tried to physically prevent the people from coming across the bridge. But we were foreigners, we were in the middle of it, and they saw we were foreigners and they let us run through.
And at that very same time, I was on the other side of the border, starting pre-production for my film Fitzcarraldo. I had built a camp for 1,100 people in the middle of the jungle, and it was attacked, burned to the ground.
Oh, really?
It was the same border war,
Mm-hmm.
and we were only probably miles apart.
Mm-hmm.
It all started here on Expressway 75, north of Dallas. This was a crime scene. Beginning here, it stretched almost half a mile to the south.
there was construction going on. It was right about here, the construction stopped, and it was that point that Douglas Feldman drove around the truck, side by side to it, and began shooting it, and then right about just a little past here, he put several rounds into the door of the truck, shooting Mr. Everett, and the truck coming to a resting stop right down the road.
And there were lots of bullet holes.
There were several bullet holes. Like I said, I want to say there was at least 2 in the driver's door, but I think there was a total of, if I remember right, maybe 8 or 9 all down the side of the truck. It's like he started shooting, the guy on the motorcycle started shooting as he got to the back of the trailer and shot all the way up the trailer and into the door of the truck. Like in a bad movie.
Only half an hour later, another shooting occurred at this gas station.
Sometime later, we got information that Dallas Police Department was working a shooting. That was probably about 15 miles from where this one occurred in the city of Dallas. It was another truck driver, but he was not operating his truck at the time. He was standing alongside of his truck.
This was a Exxon, and an Exxon with a convenience store. Had several pumps. The victim worked for Exxon. He was a 63-year-old gentleman, Hispanic man, who was in the process of refilling their pumps. And Mr. Feldman drove through on his motorcycle and shot him, I think, 3 times in the back as he leaned over doing his work. We could tell it was a male. We could not tell if he was really black or white or Hispanic. We couldn't even really tell for sure what type of motorcycle it was. During that investigation, I visited many motorcycle shops showing the video, trying to identify what type of motorcycle it was. We finally determined that it was a Harley.
But it had unusual characteristics.
The most unusual characteristic that I remember that the Harley people identified it was the exhaust. It had a type of special exhaust on the end of it that you could see in the video, and just the shadow of it. And when we showed that to the Harley people, they're the ones that told us that that's definitely a Harley. We're the only ones that had that.
The camera at the gas station where the Dallas subject was shot was a frame by frame, but when you isolated it, you see a person riding a motorcycle drive right by the driver of the gas truck with his arm extended and shooting him. It appeared to be a male, and then with the witnesses that we had at the Plano scene, she was able to somewhat identify the rider of the motorcycle, and in fact was even able to do a composite several days later.
When we put it out on TV to alert people, we got 200 calls in an hour. And we split those calls up between the Dallas Police Department and the Plano Police Department. Luckily, a neighbor had called in on Feldman to the Plano Police Department. That's how they got onto him. And they became very suspicious when the neighbor said that Feldman had always worn a beard and worn long hair. Suddenly, the day after this shooting, he's cut his own hair and shaved his beard. And it's unusual for a man to cut his own hair. And according to the witness, it looked like he cut his own hair. It was a terrible job. He looked awful. So that's what put them on to Feldman, and they brought him in for an interview. And that interview, which was taped, he showed all the characteristics of a guilty person. He was nervous. He was avoiding issues. His body language, which we are taught to observe a lot, when we're interrogating someone, was very, very suspicious. He was turning his back toward him like this, and he didn't want to look him in the eye. And another thing, too, that really spooked everybody, I guess you could say, was when Keith Grisham left the room. I guess Feldman didn't realize that the tape was still running, and he starts cussing at himself. He started talking to himself like, "You idiot, what are you doing?" Blah, 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 like that. So that really was suspicious. Why do you do that if you got nothing to hold, if you're not holding back on something? Why do you act that way? And so they were convinced, Plano Police Department was convinced, and that he was our guy. We just didn't have any proof at that time.
To the outside world, Feldman looked unobtrusive. He liked children, played the guitar, went scuba diving, and traveled extensively.
When we got to the jungle camp, there's a woman from Switzerland who has apparently, she's a scientist and she was trying to get her doctorate degree in biology. And so she set up a camp in the jungle and lived there for a number of years in order to study the forest, the trees and things. And she married an Ecuadorian man and built these little cabins on stilts where we slept. And anyone who came to visit her, whether it was tourists like us or it could have been scientific people who were going to help her in her study or whatever, would sleep in these little cabins. But they were just like bamboo floor, open windows, and no air conditioning or anything. You just slept on the floor.
And your backpack was torn apart by monkeys and the wild boar.
Yeah, they had these animals were semi-domesticated. They had cages with certain animals in them, but there was also this monkey and the boar that ran around like pets, and they tolerated them. And anyway, there's certain plant foods like pods and things that these animals know are edible. And apparently I picked one up and stuck it in my backpack, and I was going to take it with me, and I set my backpack down while I was there, and I got involved in another activity, and I heard a scuffle over there, and apparently the monkey and the boar found this pod thing, and they were attacking it, and they were trying to eat it, because it looked like a big green bean. I don't know what they call them. It's about this long, and if you break it open, it has big flat brown seeds that are covered with like a white membrane that's sweet, like sort of like cotton candy. I'm sure there's a name for it, but I don't know it.
I have seen a photo with you and the little monkey. They call it frailes.
Frailes.
Los frailes.
Yeah.
They have a very human face.
Uh-huh.
And in my film Aguirre, I have 450 of them on a raft.
Oh, really?
And the mad conquistador is talking to them.
Und wir werden Geschichte inszenieren. Wie andere Stücke auf dem Theater. Wir halten durch. Ich bin der Zorn Gottes. Wer sonst ist mit mir?
Very nice faces.
Very nice.
Very sweet animals.
Yeah. But they're very mischievous.
Yes, they bite you in your earlobe or anywhere they can bite.
And anything they can grab, if they see something and they want it, they just grab it and run away.
Yes.
So you can't let them get their hand on your glasses or anything else.
I'd like to add a few things. You almost fell off a cliff on a volcano in Chile. You were barked at by fur seals. You lost your wallet and passport in Ushuaia at the very southern tip of South America. I mean, that's the middle of nowhere. I've been there. Mm-hmm. I know what you are talking about. You fell off a roof and injured your back, and you exploded a dynamite stick. Mm-hmm. What was going on there? Was it New Year's Eve?
No, if you go to Potosi in Bolivia, that's where they have the silver mine that the conquistadors mined in the 1500s when they sent all that silver back to Spain, and there's still people that mine that same mine. They go in there. It's not a company, it's just individuals, and you can go into the market, you can buy dynamite and supplies, and you can go in there with a shovel, and if you find some silver, it's yours, and you can bring it out and sell it. And so there's a squatters camp around there with all these buildings, and you pay so many pesos every night. You can sleep in there, and every day you can go into the mine and see if you can find some silver. So it's, and anyway, I didn't go mining, but I went into the town market and I bought a stick of dynamite just to blow it up because I had never done anything like that, and it seemed like fun.
While talking about his travel adventures, Feldman seemed to be completely oblivious that he was on death row, as if his rage and his murders did not exist.
The Dallas Police Department, we put undercover officers on him for about a week, and they followed him.
Would he notice that he was followed?
I think we don't know for sure. I think he did, only because, they only followed him from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. They followed him all 12 hours. Because that's when he was hitting, was in the middle of the night. And we just didn't have the manpower to do it 24 hours a day at that time. Anyway, they followed him for 12 hours a day. And he would do things like get on his motorcycle and drive all the way, say, to Fort Worth. And he would find, say, a high-rise parking garage. And he would drive that parking garage, every inch of it, just drive it, and then drive back down, and then drive home, and just to wear you out. And because when he shot the third person, it was during the day, around noon, I think.
What happened at that scene?
He was, the gentleman, the Hispanic man that was shot was a truck driver.
Also.
Correct.
He hit me right here, like a couple inches above the heart.
His truck was parked outside the Jack in Box at the corner of Coit and LBJ. There was a phone booth there, and he was on the phone. And Feldman this time was in his Jeep. He wasn't on his motorcycle. And that's one reason we thought that he knew we were onto him, because this time he didn't drive his motorcycle. He shot the man, I can't remember how many times, didn't kill him, but almost did. The bullet missed his heart about 1/4 of an inch.
And a person was able to get the license plate and calls it in right away. The Richardson Police Department, again, was working very closely with us and was very familiar with Douglas Feldman and knew all the locations. And what we call a broadcast was made by Dallas Police Department, and it went to Richardson Police Department. Richardson officers were on the ball. They went to his apartment. Other units stood up by his mother's residence, which was in Richardson, and saw him coming home. And they were able to stop his vehicle in the driveway of his mother's residence as he was coming home from just shooting the other subject.
But when he was arrested, he had like 365 rounds of ammunition in his car. Now, that's either somebody going to the range for a long time or somebody that might want to go out in a blaze of glory if he's caught. I think if it's the latter, he basically backed out because he didn't want his mother and possibly his sister to see him be killed. Because if he'd come out of that car with a gun, the officers would have killed him. They'd had to. And because they knew what he was basically a serial killer. I mean, in Texas, you kill 2 or more, you're a serial killer. You might be serial killer junior, but you're still a serial killer. And the officers wouldn't put up with that. And I think he knew it. And I think he just got cold feet at the last instance, because when they came up to the car, he's saying, "What you want is in my glove box." And that was the gun. And he made sure that they could see his hands.
Feldman was taken into custody. Comparisons with shell casings revealed that just a day prior to his capital crimes, he had shot up a VW dealership without harming anyone. His first victim was Robert Everett. The case against Feldman was prosecuted by Jason January.
My personal style of prosecution was to have the jury, for those many, many hours they would sit there, I didn't want them only looking at the defendant in whatever state he was in. Most of the time, his lawyer would tell him just to be there and keep a poker face, don't show an expression. But I wanted the victims to be represented, so for the most part, the judges would allow me to at least have a photo of the victims already introduced into evidence and displayed during the trial. So this was, I'm not sure if it was the picture or something similar for Mr. Everett, so the jury could say, hey, here's the victim, we can see what he looks like.
He was a trucker shot on the freeway.
He was the first trucker shot that night going down the freeway, just traveling on Highway 75 and shot, I think, 12 bullets. And then the second, some minutes later, was Mr. Velasquez, who
Nicholas Velasquez.
Nicholas, and you find out later the irony of it. It was either his last day or last week ever of working. He was going to retire after he filled this last gas station after working like 30 years. And here he was, literally could see the finish line to his retirement and to be with his grandkids. And he was in the wrong place at the wrong time because Mr. Feldman shot him in the back doing his job. And so I wanted the jury to see him.
He usually worked the night shift. So he went in Monday night. I remember calling him just to tell him to be careful going to work. He and I, because of that bond, that relationship we had, we talked to each other every day, maybe 2-3 times a day. So that Monday night I called him and said, hey Dad, just wanted to say, be careful going to work. I love you. We'll talk soon. So anyway, I remember the phone ringing around 12:45. And I didn't answer it because I thought it's probably, security calling about an alarm. Anyway, so I just let it ring, and the answering machine picked it up, and it was my dad's lady friend at that time. And Judy said, Alice, pick up the phone. And so I'm jumping up, trying to reach for the phone. She goes, pick up the phone, honey. Your daddy's been shot. And at that time, I just froze. And my husband picked up the phone. And he's like, Judy? And she said, let me talk to Alice. And so he hands me the phone, and I'm like, Judy, what's wrong? What happened? She goes, honey, I don't know. Just get to the hospital. Your dad's been shot. I'm like, how? Why? How? She had no details. She just said, just get to the hospital as soon as you can. And so the last thing I remember is hanging up, getting out of bed, running to the closet to get, change of clothes. And then my husband's just standing there, and he just has tears in his eyes. And he's like, I am so sorry. And I just looked at him, and I just hugged him. And I think I must have passed out for a brief moment, because next thing I know, I'm on the floor, and he's trying to get me up. So I think I just, for a moment, passed out.
How would you break the news? What do you do? How do you handle this? Give me an example.
Perfect example is, of course, you knock on the door, you identify yourself, you say, can I come in and talk to you about something? And then you make sure they sit down. That's the first thing. You make them sit down, and sit down with them.
Why is that?
Because some people, especially ladies, will faint and fall, and you don't want another accident. Death notifications are hard. It was a rule with our department, you don't do it by yourself. You do it a minimum of 2 detectives. Or if you're by yourself, you call patrol to meet you there and help do it. Because you just don't know what's going to happen. Some people just don't know how to, some people take it very, very stoic, and some people will run off. I've chased people down the street to stop them before they hurt themselves. You just don't know. It's a dangerous job. I was knocked over a couch one time. A lady hit me so hard, knocked me over a couch. And she wasn't mad at me, she just didn't believe it. I've known people that left homicide because they just couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't the case. It wasn't a homicide. It was dealing with the families. Because you basically become part of their family, whether you like it or not. And they're either going to hate you or they're going to love you. If you don't solve it or you can't solve it, they hate you. If you solve it, you're a hero. There's no in between.
And you studied at university, SMU, very prestigious
Right.
university.
Yeah, it's in Dallas.
And you excelled.
Yes, I graduated with honors.
Yes, magna cum laude.
Right.
And you were on the dean's list.
Right, almost every semester.
What went wrong? Now you're on death row.
I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer in a short period of time, you know. But I think a lot of things went wrong. I graduated from college and I started working in the healthcare industry for hospitals, doing consulting work. And I worked really hard for a long time. It took about 4 years to get my degree, plus another year, 8 years working. And I think I just got tired of working so hard because it was very demanding. So I decided to take a year off and go traveling. And when I started traveling, after a year, I had a pretty good amount of good fun, you know, while I was traveling and enjoyed it, but I found I didn't want to go back to work after I was through. And so then I was sort of stuck, like, what do I do now? And I just sort of drifted for quite a few years with no purpose and no job and no income, and finally my money ran out. And then I was really in trouble.
Drugs.
Pardon?
And drugs and drug dealing?
Oh, no, not really. I mean, I've sampled a lot of drugs, you know, over the years, but I'd never really was a person like that would use every day and like a junkie or something like that. I'm kind of like a recreational user. If I found something, I might use it for a few days and then I'm gone somewhere else.
But you were into it more seriously before you were 19.
Right, yeah, in my teenage
You
years.
started as a kid, 11 or so, drinking and smoking weed.
Yeah, I did.
And selling weed.
Yeah.
And crossing the Mexican border and bringing some quantities of weed across the border.
Yeah, I did do that too. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
And you made some money?
A little bit. I mean, a few $1,000s maybe.
But it landed you in juvenile detention.
Yeah.
And later, when you were 18, landed you in jail.
Right.
For how long?
I did 2 years for possession of narcotics. I was arrested, and that's all on my record, I think, my criminal record. I did like a 2-year sentence, and I got a probation on another charge for 10 years.
And of course, you traveled all over South America.
Yes.
You were in Antarctica.
Yeah, for 10 days.
I did a film in Antarctica, but in McMurdo Station. You were at the peninsula.
McMurdo, yeah, on the Antarctic Peninsula.
Yes. I brought a photo, you in the penguin.
Oh, yeah.
May I show it to you?
Yeah. Where did you get all this stuff? My mother gave it to you?
From your mother.
Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. Yeah.
And there is yet another penguin and you.
Yeah.
There is a penguin, I'll show it to you.
I remember that.
What are the origins of this amount of hatred?
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of answer?
I don't know. It's a difficult topic to address in a short period of time, but I think I was angry because I worked so hard to get my degree, and then my job was really demanding, and I got tired of it, and it just wasn't what I expected it to be. Now, I did make good money, so I accomplished that goal, but in terms of what I was doing every day, I just got tired of it, and I thought I've worked all this hard, and now this is what I have to do to make my living.
Yes, but all of us have hard days at work.
Yeah.
And we are frustrated quite often, but you actually shot and killed a trucker. And half an hour later, you pulled into a gas station and killed yet another truck driver.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any explanation how does it get so violent, such a deep rage, so much hatred?
I don't know. It was really just what happened. It's hard to say. But
it just happened. That's what is puzzling for me.
yeah.
Try to find some sort of an answer.
Well, I think just about
Maybe back in childhood, maybe back in wherever.
I don't know about all that. You know, I was almost hit by a truck, the first guy, and that's why I shot him. Because he put my life in danger.
And the second one?
I was still angry. And it was just bad luck for him.
And if we didn't have a bulletproof glass between us, it might be bad luck for me. Have you ever seen Feldman in court, for example?
Yes,
What was your impression? What goes through your mind?
Satan. To me, he was pure Satan. That's the only way that I could describe him. He had the look of evil. No remorse, no regrets, just pure hatred and evilness. I mean, you could even just sense it in the room as soon as he walked in. You could sense just the evilness that walked through that door.
You don't believe in morals either.
Well, I don't know. I don't believe in anybody else's morals. That's really kind of a hard question. I mean, I'm just a person. There's things I do, things I wouldn't do because they're either pleasant or not pleasant to me, and it may not be the same for you, you know? I don't know. Now, society would call it morals because they're trying to codify everything and they're trying to actually spell it out in a system of rules, and they want to identify specific behaviors and define them as moral or amoral. And you got to understand that that's something that society has constructed, and it doesn't have anything to do with me personally other than I live in society and they're going to subject me to their definitions. That's true, and that's why I'm in prison. Because there were some societies, if I would have lived 1,000 years ago and gotten involved in some kind of thing where I killed, they might have said, well, okay, let's go to dinner now, you know, and let's, you know, it wouldn't have been a criminal activity necessarily. That's sort of been developed as a proscribed behavior by society. It's amoral because they don't want you going around killing people, you know.
How do you explain the depth of hatred?
Well, unfortunately, and it's hard to believe, I used to tell my friends that, you know, weren't in law enforcement, you just don't know. I mean, until you live in that world for a while and see that there are true, you know, evil does exist out there. It's hard to explain to people. They'll think in their own mind, well, I would have never done that, or a rational person would have never done that. But you're not dealing with that. You're dealing with somebody that for whatever reason, whether it's innate or drug-induced, pick your reason on how you get there, but he got to a point where the rational person governor that stops you from killing people had gone away, and to him, you got in his way, he's going to shoot you.
Do you have similar examples?
Oh yeah, of course. You know, I've had multiple cases that you wouldn't believe where someone got on, one of them got on drugs. Terrible case. He broke into a family's house, their residence, was there for several hours. The patriarch of the family was an older gentleman in a wheelchair. He took him, shot him through and through, got the hedge clippers, cut his penis off, and threw the penis in the backyard, then stayed around and talked to the son for a while. The son talked him out of killing everybody else, and he hitchhiked home. I mean, you know, you can't make that stuff up. There are horrible crimes that happen out there. Another example would be some kind of what you would consider routine robbers that were too lazy to actually get out of their house to find a victim, like like the normal robber would. So they called the Domino's pizza delivery man, and he brought the pizza. They said, "Give us your money." He said, "Sure, I'll give you the money." That wasn't good enough for him. They took him to a bridge, one of the bridges that connects Oak Cliff to Dallas, over the Trinity River. It's not much of it. And they told him, "Look, if you jump, we will not shoot you." He jumped. They shot him anyway with a shotgun, blew his head off. And so he not only got shot in the back of the head, killed, and we could probably debate and talk about that case until we're blue in the face, and we're never going to have a really good reason on why they had to. This guy was complying completely. The victim was, and it didn't stop these criminals just from the, you would think, maybe the sheer exhilaration of killing somebody.
You have been given an execution date.
Right. Yeah, next July 31st.
How do you cope with that?
There's not much I can do about it now, is there? So I don't really worry about it. I guess maybe as I get a little closer, I probably will become more concerned, you know. When I think about them leading me over to Huntsville to go execute me, I'm sure I'll be fearful, you know, and uncomfortable, but in terms of there's not much I can do about it.
Since Polonsky unit does not have a death chamber, prisoners are transported some 40 miles to the state penitentiary in Huntsville for their execution. But now you're not afraid.
Well,
Afraid of dying.
I don't really want to die, but it's not up to me because they've condemned me to death, and they're the ones they have the force to take my life from me. You know, I can't prevent them from doing it. So I'm sort of like just sitting here, you know, waiting for them to get through with the paperwork.
And he has an execution date now.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that?
Well, part of me is, what's the word? Relieved, because his pain will be over. And it's been hell for him, especially the last year in prison, the way he's been abused. And I want that to end, and I can't stop it because I've tried. I've contacted everybody I could think of that help people who are in prison. And they say, unless you're a group, they can't help you. And part of me is hurting because I will lose I've already lost him, but I will really lose him. The son that I love so much, and who's so, to me, gentle, loving, caring, intelligent person. And he's done so many wonderful things. And I don't know why or how he did the one terrible thing in that day. And I've had therapists tell me that was his way of committing suicide.
Frequently in his letters, there are hints of his wish to die. But his letters and his handwriting show something else, something strange, almost schizophrenic. This is Feldman's regular longhand, but 2 days later this. his letter to himself, as if his mind and his handwriting had come apart. And then there were other signs.
He came to me and said, I want to talk to you, Mom. Will you please come outside? I can't talk to you inside. And I said, well, why do you want to go outside? He said, I can't talk to you here because they'll hear me. And I said, okay. And we went outside in the backyard. And he said, they've made me do terrible things. They're making my life miserable. They're making me do things I don't want to do.
Who are they?
He couldn't tell me. It's just
Voices.
Voices. He finally agreed to admit himself into a psychiatric hospital.
Around the same time, Feldman ominously gave away all his worldly possessions. Soon afterwards, he committed his crimes. From this conversation here, he has 8 months to live, unless there is a last moment reprieve. Would you go to witness the execution? He has a date.
He does have a date.
Yes.
I have contemplated whether I want to be present or not. In a way, I want to be present because I feel like that's a way of having a voice for my dad, if you will. But then at times I don't, because I don't care to hear his last words. I don't know if he would say something that we would have to remember the rest of our lives.
I think about him every day, and he's in my heart. He's in my head. And the one thing I can't handle is not being able to put my arms around him and hold him next to my body and comfort him. That's the painful part, that I cannot make him okay. And I can't feel him, and I can't touch him. He wouldn't do any harm to me. Why can't I give him my warmth and my love before he dies, before they kill him? Because they're doing to him what he did to somebody else. They are killing my son. And true, he did a terrible act. If there was anything I could do, I would take it back somehow. I would take it for him somehow.
I would like to quote a poem from you. Life is a terrible thing to waste. You wrote that once in a poem.
I did?
Yes. And may I quote the end of the poem? There is no gold at the end of the rainbow. There's only the end.
Yeah.
You have written poetry and you wrote that.
Yeah, I might have. I don't remember it specifically, but it's possible that I did, yeah.
I read it this morning.
Oh, yeah. So what do you want me to comment on it or what?
No, I just want to quote you because in a way it reflects our conversation.
Yeah.
And in a way, of course, there's no golden rainbow for you. It's just the end.
Yeah. Well, I'm not religious anyway, so
Yeah.
you have a lot of religious people that think that when they die, they're going to go somewhere else. And I don't believe that. I think you just die. So there's nothing after your death.
So it's more nihilistic.
More realistic.
Okay.
And, you know, I think these people that are all religious are sort of delirious, and they've sort of talked themselves into believing that there's some sort of God and there's some sort of afterlife, and they're going to go to heaven after they die, and it's really sort of foolish, if you ask me.
And there's no hell either, in your opinion?
No, I think you just become biomass. You know what biomass is?
Sure.
Like a leaf falls off a tree, and it becomes biomass. That's you. When you die, it's just over.